Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to the English Globe. I'm Adam, and today we're bringing you another educational English podcast that helps you improve your listening, build your vocabulary, and understand world events in a simple and clear way. Wherever you are listening from, whether it's on YouTube, in your car, or through your phone, we're happy that you've joined us. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the English Globe, and tell us in the comments where you are listening from. We'd also love to hear your thoughts and opinions about today's topic, because it's one that the entire world is watching very carefully.
That's right, Adam. Today's discussion is about a very important question. Is China planning a military move on Taiwan? This question is not only being discussed by world leaders, journalists, and analysts. It's also becoming an important part of global education. Many English learners want to understand these international issues, but the language used in news articles can often be difficult. So, in this episode, we will explain everything in simple, easy-to-understand English, while also helping you learn new words related to politics, geography, and international relations.
Exactly, Julia. We'll explore why this topic matters, what's happening in that region, and what different countries are saying. But remember, our goal is not to take sides or promote any political message. Our goal is to educate, to inform, and to help our listeners grow their understanding of the world in the English language. We believe that learning about world events can make your English stronger because it connects real ideas with real words. When you understand global stories, you also understand how English is used in real-life conversations.
Let's start by talking about where this story takes place. Taiwan is a small island in East Asia, located near the southeast coast of China. It's about 100 miles, or 160 kilometers, away from mainland China, across the Taiwan Strait. The island is home to over 23 million people, and it has its own government, military, and economy. However, China sees Taiwan as part of its territory and has long said that it will one day be reunited with the mainland, even if that requires force. This disagreement has created one of the most sensitive and tense situations in the world.
And that tension is not new. For many decades, China and Taiwan have had a complicated relationship. Many countries, including the United States, have also become involved in this issue because of their interests in trade, security, and democracy. The situation affects not only East Asia, but also the global economy. So, understanding this topic helps us understand why certain events, like military drills, political speeches, or trade agreements, make global headlines.
And for English learners, there's another reason this is important. When you read or listen to global news, you're not only learning about politics, you're also learning how people express opinions, discuss conflicts, and explain causes and effects in English. You hear phrases like military build-up, territorial dispute, diplomatic tension, and peaceful resolution. By listening to this podcast, you can understand what these expressions mean and how they are used in real-world discussions.
That's why we want you, dear listeners, to listen carefully and maybe even take notes while we talk. We'll explain every idea in simple English and help you connect it with your language learning journey. And remember, this is also a great opportunity to practice your listening comprehension. Try to repeat the key phrases, write down new vocabulary, and use them in your daily conversations.
Yes, and we also encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us where you're listening from. Are you in Asia, Europe, Africa, or somewhere else in the world? We always enjoy hearing from our global family of learners. Every time you share your opinion, you're practicing English and building your confidence. Communication is about sharing ideas, and that's exactly what we want this community to be about.
Now, let's talk a little about why this topic has become such a big issue in international news. Over the past few years, many countries have noticed that China's military power has grown very quickly. China has built new aircraft carriers, modern jets, and advanced missiles. At the same time, Taiwan has also been preparing to defend itself, improving its military and working with allies. The question that many experts ask today is, could these tensions lead to a conflict in the future? That's what makes this discussion both urgent and educational.
But it's also important to understand that this is a very complex topic. Some experts believe China is increasing pressure on Taiwan only to send a political message, not to start a war. Others think there could be long-term plans for reunification through both military and political strategies. The truth is that no one can predict the future, but we can study the facts, understand the language, and learn how countries communicate their goals.
And that's what makes this topic such a valuable learning opportunity for English students. When you learn English through real global events, you are not only learning vocabulary, you are learning how the world works. You begin to understand how leaders make statements, how journalists report, and how people around the world react to the same event in different ways. This gives you both knowledge and cultural awareness.
Exactly. Our podcast is designed to bring English and knowledge together. We believe that when you learn English through topics like this, it becomes more meaningful. You're not just memorizing grammar, you're connecting ideas to reality. You're learning how to think in English about world issues.
And we want to remind our listeners that the English Globe is not a news channel. It's an educational platform. We don't promote any government or political opinion. Our goal is simply to help you understand English better and to make global news more accessible to learners everywhere. That's why we explain everything step by step, using simple and clear words.
Yes, and this topic, China and Taiwan, can teach us many useful English words that appear often in the news. Words like sovereignty, which means the power of a country to govern itself. Reunification, which means bringing two parts together again. Conflict, which means a serious disagreement. And diplomacy, which means managing relationships between countries peacefully. As you listen, try to remember these words and understand how they're used in sentences.
So, dear listeners, before we move forward, let's take a short moment to remind you. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the English Globe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next episodes. It really helps our channel grow and allows us to keep creating free educational podcasts for you every week. And remember, we love hearing from you. Your comments, questions, and opinions help us make each episode better for learners like you.
Absolutely. Learning English is a journey, and we're all part of it together. By listening to this podcast, you're taking another step toward fluency. So, keep an open mind, listen carefully, and don't worry if you don't understand every single word. The goal is to understand the main ideas, learn useful phrases, and build your confidence, step by step.
Now that we've introduced the topic, we'll soon explore how the China-Taiwan situation developed historically and why it continues to be one of the most discussed issues in the world today. Stay with us as we dive deeper into the story and learn more English through understanding global events. Before we talk about what's happening today, it's important to understand how this situation started. The history between China and Taiwan is long, complex, and filled with events that have shaped the modern world. But don't worry, we will explain everything in simple English, step by step, so you can follow easily and also learn useful new vocabulary along the way. Understanding history helps us make sense of today's headlines and gives us the background we need to understand future changes.
That's right, Adam. Let's begin with some basic facts. Taiwan is a beautiful island located off the southeastern coast of China. For many centuries, it was influenced by Chinese culture, language, and people. In the 1600s, it was ruled by different powers, including local kingdoms, and later by the Qing dynasty, which was the last imperial dynasty of China. During this time, Chinese settlers moved to the island, bringing their traditions and ways of life. The Qing government officially made Taiwan a province of China in 1887, which means it became part of Chinese territory under that empire.
However, things changed dramatically after that. In 1895, China fought a war with Japan known as the First Sino-Japanese War. China lost that war, and as part of the peace agreement called the Treaty of Shimonoseki, the Qing dynasty was forced to give Taiwan to Japan. That means Taiwan was under Japanese rule for about 50 years. During that time, Japan built new roads, schools, and industries on the island. Some Taiwanese people adapted to Japanese culture, while others resisted it. This period shaped Taiwan's identity in a special way. It became a mix of Chinese and Japanese influences.
Then came the end of World War II in 1945. Japan lost the war, and one of the results was that it gave up control of Taiwan. The Allied powers, which included countries like the United States and the United Kingdom, decided that Taiwan would be handed back to China, which was then ruled by the Republic of China government. So, after 1945, Taiwan once again came under Chinese control, but this time under a different kind of government. Not an emperor, but a republic led by Chiang Kai-shek and his political party called the Kuomintang, or KMT.
But here's where the story becomes more complicated. In the late 1940s, China experienced a huge civil war between two main groups, the nationalists led by Chiang Kai-shek and the communists led by Mao Zedong. This war was not about foreign enemies. It was a fight within China to decide which political system would rule the country. After years of intense conflict, the Communist Party won the war in 1949 and established the People's Republic of China, often called PRC, on the mainland. The nationalists, who lost, retreated to Taiwan, taking with them many officials, soldiers, and citizens who supported them.
Exactly. From that point, two separate governments existed. The Communist government controlled mainland China and called itself the People's Republic of China. Meanwhile, the nationalist government controlled Taiwan and continued to call itself the Republic of China. Both sides claimed to be the legitimate government of all of China. This disagreement became the root of the current problem. For many years, both governments said, "We are the real China," and both refused to recognize the other. This division created not only political tension, but also shaped identities. People in Taiwan started to develop their own sense of who they were, connected to Chinese history, yes, but also proud of their island's freedom and democracy. On the other side, the government in Beijing continued to believe that Taiwan was simply a temporarily separated province that would one day be reunited with the mainland.
That separation has lasted for more than 70 years now. During the Cold War, the period of political tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, Taiwan became an ally of the U.S., while the People's Republic of China was closer to the Soviet bloc at first. For a time, the United Nations even recognized Taiwan, the Republic of China, as the official representative of China. But in 1971, the UN voted to give China's seat to the government in Beijing instead. That moment was a turning point because most countries around the world began to formally recognize the People's Republic of China as the one China, even though many continued informal relations with Taiwan.
And that leads to something very important called the One China policy. This policy means that most countries acknowledge there is only one Chinese government and that Taiwan is part of China. But at the same time, many of those countries do business with Taiwan and support it in unofficial ways. It's a delicate balance. The One China policy is the reason why you rarely see countries officially calling Taiwan a separate nation, even though it operates like one. It has its own elections, its own military, and its own president, but only a few nations formally recognize it as an independent state.
That's an excellent point. For English learners, the word policy means an official plan or principle that guides decisions. So when we say One China policy, we're talking about an official rule that countries follow in their diplomatic relationships. It's also useful to learn the word sovereignty, which means the right of a country to control itself without outside interference. Taiwan has sovereignty in practice. It runs its own affairs, but not in the eyes of most of the international community, because they follow the One China policy.
Yes, and over the years, this policy has been tested many times. Whenever leaders in Taiwan talk about independence, or when world leaders visit Taiwan, China often reacts strongly. China sees those actions as a challenge to its national unity. At the same time, many people in Taiwan feel proud of their democracy and want to protect their freedom to make their own decisions. So, even though there is no open war, there is constant tension, a kind of political and military pressure that makes both sides stay alert.
This ongoing tension has also affected the everyday lives of people. Taiwan has grown into a modern, high-tech society with one of the strongest economies in Asia. It produces many of the world's computer chips, which are used in phones, cars, and electronics. China, on the other hand, has become a global economic power and the world's largest exporter. Both sides are deeply connected economically, but politically, they remain divided. It's almost like two people living in the same neighborhood who trade with each other, but still argue about who owns the house.
That's a good way to explain it. And when we look at this history, we can see why today's situation is so sensitive. For China, Taiwan is a symbol of national unity, a part of the country that they believe must one day return to the mainland. For Taiwan, it's a symbol of democracy and independence, a place where people have their own government and freedom of choice. Each side sees the same island through a different lens, and that's what makes it so difficult to solve.
It's also important to remember that many countries are involved in this issue, not just China and Taiwan. The United States has played a major role for decades, providing Taiwan with defensive weapons and supporting its participation in the international community, even though the U.S. officially follows the One China policy. Japan, Australia, and several European countries also keep close ties with Taiwan, mostly because of its role in global trade and technology. So when we talk about this issue, we're really talking about a web of relationships that connect much of the world.
For English learners, this history teaches another valuable lesson: that words like territory, recognition, independence, and unity are not just vocabulary items. They represent deep ideas that shape how countries behave. When you hear these words in the news, think about what they mean in this context. Territory means land that belongs to a country. Recognition means accepting something officially. Independence means freedom to make your own choices. Unity means being together as one. By learning the story of China and Taiwan, you're not only learning history, you're learning the real meaning behind these important English words.
That's very true, Julia. And as we move forward in our podcast, we'll explore how this historical background has led to the current situation, the growing military presence around the Taiwan Strait, the statements from both governments, and what experts think might happen next. But understanding the past is the key to understanding the present. Without knowing the story of how we got here, it's impossible to understand why this issue matters so much today.
So, dear listeners, we hope this section helped you understand where it all began and how history continues to shape the world we live in. Don't forget to tell us in the comments what you found most interesting about this story, and if you learned a new English word, share it too. Every word you learn brings you closer to mastering the language. Stay tuned. In the next part, we'll discuss what's happening now in the region, the military activities, the signals from both sides, and what experts are observing around Taiwan today.
Now that we understand the long history between China and Taiwan, let's move to what's happening today. In recent years, many people around the world have been watching the Taiwan Strait very closely. The Taiwan Strait is a narrow body of water that separates Taiwan from mainland China. It's not just a simple piece of ocean, It's one of the most sensitive and closely monitored areas in the world. Ships, aircraft, and military forces from both sides often operate near this region, which is why international observers describe it as a flashpoint, meaning a place where conflict could suddenly start if things go wrong.
That's right, Adam. Over the past few years, there have been many reports of Chinese military aircraft flying near Taiwan's airspace and warships sailing around the island. The Taiwanese government has often said that Chinese planes cross what's called the median line. That's an imaginary line in the middle of the Taiwan Strait that separates the two sides. For many years, both sides mostly respected that line, but recently, China's military has begun crossing it more often, which many experts see as a sign of growing pressure. When this happens, Taiwan's Air Force usually sends its own planes to monitor and sometimes warn the Chinese aircraft. These actions are part of what's called military drills, meaning training exercises designed to prepare for possible future conflicts.
Exactly. Military drills are like rehearsals. They allow the armed forces to test their readiness, check their coordination, and send messages to the world. When China holds a large military drill near Taiwan, it's not just practicing, it's also showing its power and testing the responses of other countries. Some drills include missile launches, naval movements, and air operations around the island. These actions are often followed by strong political statements from both sides, which makes the situation more tense.
For English learners, it's useful to understand words like exercise, drill, maneuver, and deployment. All of these words describe military activity. An exercise or drill means a training operation. A maneuver means a movement of troops or vehicles, often carefully planned. And deployment means sending military forces to a particular place. You'll see these words often when reading international news about defense or security. Learning them can help you understand reports and articles more clearly.
That's an excellent vocabulary tip, Julia. And while these drills might seem like simple military routines, they actually send strong political messages. For example, when Taiwan holds its own military exercises, it's usually to show that it can protect itself and is ready for any emergency. When China conducts similar exercises, it often says it's responding to provocations, which means actions it sees as challenges, such as meetings between Taiwanese leaders and officials from other countries. This kind of back-and-forth activity makes the region more nervous, because even one misunderstanding in such a sensitive area could lead to a serious crisis.
And it's not just about planes and ships. Modern military activity also includes cyber operations and information campaigns. These are digital forms of conflict. For example, both China and Taiwan invest heavily in cybersecurity. That means protecting computer systems and communication networks from attacks. Sometimes reports say that government websites or digital systems have been targeted by hackers. This is part of what experts call hybrid warfare, meaning a combination of military and non-military actions used to gain an advantage without starting a full-scale war.
Hybrid warfare is a very important term to understand. It includes things like misinformation, economic pressure, and cyber attacks. For instance, instead of launching missiles, a country might try to weaken another country's economy or create confusion by spreading false news online. This is cheaper, faster, and less risky than open conflict, and it can still have a big impact. Many analysts believe that in the modern world, wars are no longer only fought with tanks and soldiers, but also with data, technology, and information.
Yes, and when we talk about China's recent actions, we can see that they use both military and political tools. For example, China often announces joint drills involving its Navy, Air Force, and Rocket Force. These are coordinated exercises that show how well different branches of the military can work together. At the same time, China's leaders often speak about protecting national unity and defending sovereignty. These statements are aimed at both domestic and international audiences. They remind the Chinese people of their government's position while warning other countries not to interfere.
Taiwan's leaders, on the other hand, emphasize self-defense and peaceful resolution. They say Taiwan wants to live peacefully with China, but must be prepared to defend itself if attacked. That's why Taiwan has increased its military budget in recent years and started buying more advanced weapons systems from other countries, especially from the United States. You might hear about Taiwan purchasing missiles, fighter jets, or anti-ship weapons. These are all part of its strategy to make any potential invasion too costly and difficult to succeed.
The world watches these developments closely. The United States, Japan, and other countries often express concern whenever China's drills appear more aggressive. For example, when large numbers of Chinese aircraft fly near Taiwan, Washington and Tokyo usually issue public statements calling for restraint. The word restraint means controlling your actions to avoid causing more tension. It's an important word in diplomatic English. Leaders often say, "We call on all sides to show restraint," which is a polite way of asking them not to make the situation worse.
Exactly. And diplomacy, that is, communication between governments, becomes extremely important here. No country wants a misunderstanding that could lead to war. So, even though both China and Taiwan are firm in their positions, they often use diplomatic language to manage the situation. This is why you'll hear words like dialogue, negotiation, and stability in news reports about Taiwan. These words suggest that leaders prefer to keep communication open instead of letting tensions turn into conflict.
For English learners, these are great vocabulary words to remember. Dialogue means an open conversation or discussion between two or more sides. Negotiation means trying to reach an agreement through discussion. And stability means a situation where things are steady and not changing too quickly or dangerously. By learning these terms, you're not only improving your English, but also developing the language skills to talk about global issues with confidence.
Now, let's take a closer look at the scale of these military activities. In 2023 and 2024, Taiwan reported hundreds of cases where Chinese aircraft entered its air defense identification zone, a special area where aircraft are monitored for security. These flights included fighter jets, bombers, and surveillance planes. Each time it happens, Taiwan's military has to respond, which increases the risk of accidents or mistakes. Some analysts say this constant pressure is part of a larger strategy called gray zone tactics. That term means actions that are not open war, but are still meant to exhaust the opponent and test their readiness.
Gray zone tactics are a fascinating concept. They include things like sending Coast Guard ships near disputed islands, flying drones over borders, or using online influence campaigns. These actions don't start a war, but they create psychological and political pressure. It's like a chess game where one side keeps making small moves to make the other side nervous. Over time, it can wear down the opponent's patience and resources. Many countries around the world are now studying how to respond to grey zone strategies because they are becoming more common in international conflicts.
That's true. Another important part of this discussion is the role of technology. China has been developing advanced military equipment, including hypersonic missiles, stealth aircraft, and new naval vessels. Taiwan, in response, focuses on what experts call asymmetric defense. That means using smaller, faster, and more flexible systems to counter a much larger military force. For example, Taiwan invests in drones, portable missiles, and cyber defense. The goal is to protect the island using smart, efficient technology instead of trying to match China's size.
Technology also plays a big role in communication and intelligence. Satellites, radar systems, and data collection help both sides monitor each other's movements in real time. This means that even small activities, like a ship moving through a certain zone, are noticed almost immediately. The advantage of this technology is that it can prevent surprises, but it can also increase tension because every move is closely watched and sometimes misinterpreted. That's why experts often say that managing communication is just as important as managing weapons.
You're absolutely right, Julia. When we think about these military activities, it's easy to focus only on weapons and numbers, but what's really important is understanding the message behind them. Every exercise, every drill, every announcement is part of what's called strategic signaling. That means using military actions to send political messages. China's message is usually about unity and strength, while Taiwan's message is about defense and independence. The challenge is that sometimes these signals are misunderstood, and misunderstanding between powerful militaries can be dangerous.
That's why world leaders and international organizations continue to call for peaceful solutions. They encourage both sides to use dialogue instead of force. This is also a good lesson for English learners. In life, communication can solve problems before they grow bigger. Just as in politics, in language learning too, the more you communicate, the better you understand. So, while we learn new vocabulary about global security, we also learn about the importance of understanding, patience, and respect between people and countries.
Well said, Julia. So far, we've seen that military activities around Taiwan are not just about fighting. They're about power, communication, and global attention. The drills, aircraft flights, and statements are all part of a complex game of signaling and preparation. Whether these actions will ever lead to an actual conflict is something no one can say for sure, but they definitely remind us how fragile peace can be and how carefully it must be protected.
In the next part of our podcast, we'll discuss what both sides, China and Taiwan, officially say about this issue. What are China's goals and messages, and how does Taiwan respond? Understanding their words can help us see how governments use language to shape public opinion. It's not only a story about military activity, it's also a story about communication and diplomacy. And that's a great way to keep improving your English through real global topics.
Now that we've explored the recent military activities, let's talk about what each side is actually saying. Because words in international politics are just as powerful as actions. When we listen carefully to the statements made by China and Taiwan, we begin to see how each side frames the issue and presents its version of the truth. China's government continues to describe Taiwan as an inseparable part of its territory, a province that must one day return to the mainland. From Beijing's perspective, this is not about expansion or aggression. They call it national reunification.
That's right, Adam. China often repeats that it hopes for peaceful reunification, meaning that it wants Taiwan to agree voluntarily to become part of China again. However, Chinese officials also state that they will never rule out the use of force if Taiwan declares formal independence or moves too far away from what they call the One China principle. For listeners who are learning English, this phrase, never rule out the use of force, means that they keep the military option open, even though they say it's not their first choice. It's a kind of political warning.
And when we look at Taiwan's side, the picture changes completely. Taiwan's government says that it is already a self-governing democracy, and only its people have the right to decide their future. Taiwanese leaders often emphasize freedom, human rights, and democracy as the values that define their society. They reject China's claims of ownership. In many speeches, Taiwan's president and defense officials have promised to strengthen their security and protect their way of life. They also make it clear that any attack would be resisted, and they thank their international partners for support.
The language used by both sides is very interesting from an English learning point of view. For example, China uses phrases like internal affair, sovereignty, and reunification. These words suggest control and unity. On the other hand, Taiwan uses words like democracy, self-determination, and freedom. These suggest independence and choice. Both sides are using emotionally powerful vocabulary to win international understanding. So, when you read or listen to global news, try to notice which words each side prefers. It helps you see how language shapes politics.
Let's also mention what other countries say about this issue. Most nations, including the United States and European countries, officially recognize the One China policy. That means they do not formally see Taiwan as an independent country, but they also don't support military action against it. They usually say they want the issue to be solved peacefully through dialogue. This careful diplomatic position allows them to trade and communicate with both sides. It's a delicate balance, a kind of tightrope walk in diplomacy.
Yes, and this situation often leads to a lot of tension in international meetings. For instance, when Taiwan's leaders visit other countries, or when foreign officials visit Taiwan, China often reacts strongly. It might express anger, hold military drills, or issue formal protests. These actions are symbolic. They show disapproval without directly starting a conflict. And for English learners, it's useful to note words like condemn, protest, retaliate, and escalate. These appear often in global news about China and Taiwan.
Another important point is how both governments use media. China's state media emphasizes unity and strength, presenting the government as a guardian of national integrity. They highlight military exercises as proof of readiness and patriotism. Taiwan's media, however, focuses on democracy and international friendship, showing support from allies and encouraging citizens to stay confident. Both sides understand the power of storytelling, and that's why international audiences often hear very different versions of the same event.
And that brings us to the importance of critical thinking. As English learners, you can practice reading articles from different news sources. Try comparing one report from Chinese state media with one from a Western outlet and one from Taiwanese news. You'll quickly see how each one uses tone, vocabulary, and even photographs to shape perception. This not only helps you learn English, but also trains your mind to recognize bias and perspective, a very valuable skill in today's media environment.
Absolutely, Julia. Also, it's good to remember that official statements often serve two audiences, the international community and domestic citizens. When China's government speaks about Taiwan, it also sends a message to its own people to show that it is strong and in control. The same applies to Taiwan. When leaders talk about freedom and democracy, they remind citizens of their shared values and build national unity. So, political communication always has layers of meaning, both inside and outside the country.
So to summarize this part, China says Taiwan must one day reunite with the mainland, preferably through peace, but by force if necessary. Taiwan says it's already independent in practice and will defend its democracy. The rest of the world mostly hopes to avoid war and encourages dialogue. For English learners, the key takeaway is not just the facts, but the vocabulary and phrasing that reveal each side's goals and beliefs. Every phrase carries intention, and understanding that intention is part of mastering the language of international relations.
That's a perfect summary. And in our next section, we'll look at the deeper strategic motives behind these positions, why China might want control over Taiwan beyond history or politics, and how global power and security play into the story. Stay tuned, dear listeners, as we continue to learn, not just about world affairs, but about how English can help us understand them better. Now that we've discussed what China and Taiwan are saying publicly, let's go a little deeper and explore why China might even consider a military move on Taiwan. In global affairs, every nation's actions come from a mix of motives, political, economic, and strategic. For China, the most visible motive is national reunification. The Chinese government has said for decades that bringing Taiwan under its control is part of completing what it calls the Great Rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. In simple words, that means restoring China to what it believes is its rightful position as a united and powerful country after a long history of division and foreign interference.
Yes, Adam, that's a key point. The idea of reunification is deeply tied to national pride and identity. For many Chinese citizens, Taiwan is not a foreign country, but a part of China that temporarily separated. This belief fuels emotional and political motivation. So, when we hear leaders in Beijing talk about one China, it's not just about territory. It's about history, dignity, and unity. This emotional connection helps the government strengthen internal support for its policies. From an English learning perspective, the term national unity means a sense of belonging and shared identity among citizens of one country.
Another motive we must discuss is regional power projection. This means showing strength and influence beyond one's borders. China has become a global economic giant, but to protect its interests, it also wants to ensure security in its surrounding seas. Taiwan is strategically located at the heart of the first island chain, a line of islands stretching from Japan to the Philippines. Controlling or influencing Taiwan would give China greater control over this area and make it easier to project military power across the Pacific. This isn't only about Taiwan itself, but also about reshaping the regional balance of power.
Exactly, Adam. And we should also talk about critical sea lanes. Taiwan lies near some of the busiest shipping routes in the world. These sea lanes are like economic lifelines through which energy supplies, raw materials, and finished goods flow between East Asia and the rest of the world. If China could control the waters around Taiwan, it could gain more influence over international trade routes. And that means more leverage in global politics. For learners, leverage means having power or influence to make others do what you want. This explains why Taiwan's location is often described as strategically vital.
There's another factor: the desire to deter external actors, especially the United States and its allies. China knows that Taiwan receives military and political support from the US, Japan, and several Western nations. These relationships give Taiwan confidence but also frustrate Beijing. By increasing military pressure, China might want to warn other countries not to get too close to Taiwan. This is called deterrence, using threats or shows of strength to prevent someone from taking unwanted action. It's like saying, "Don't interfere, or there will be consequences."
Good point, Adam. And this connects directly to China's broader strategic goals. Some analysts believe China's goal is not necessarily a full invasion, at least not right away, but rather to weaken Taiwan's will to resist through pressure. This could include blockades, which means surrounding an island and cutting off trade or supplies. Coercion, which means using threats or limited force to make another side obey. And psychological operations, like spreading fear through disinformation or cyber attacks. These are non-traditional tools of warfare. They don't always involve open fighting, but still aim to achieve control.
That's right. China might also use economic leverage. By restricting imports, exports, or tourism, it can hurt Taiwan's economy and make people feel insecure. It might also target communication networks or launch cyber attacks to cause confusion. These are examples of hybrid warfare, where military and non-military tactics are mixed together. For example, instead of sending soldiers first, China could use digital tools to disrupt Taiwan's banking or government systems. In this kind of conflict, the battlefield isn't just on land or sea, it's also in cyberspace and public opinion.
And we can't forget internal political motives. Sometimes governments take strong external actions to strengthen their popularity at home. If leaders face economic challenges, public dissatisfaction, or political tension, they might emphasize national pride to unite people. In China's case, showing determination over Taiwan can help maintain support for the ruling party and its image as a defender of sovereignty. This is called diversionary politics, using foreign policy to distract from domestic issues. For English learners, the word sovereignty means a country's full right to govern itself without outside control.
Yes, Julia, And that's why it's so complex. China's motives are not just about one island. They are about history, identity, power, economy, and international image. At the same time, many experts argue that China may prefer to achieve its goals without actual war, because a large-scale conflict could damage its economy, isolate it diplomatically, and create instability. So it's more likely that China will continue using pressure, persuasion, and gradual influence. Understanding this helps English learners see how global powers often mix diplomacy and strategy instead of jumping straight to military action.
So to sum up, China's possible motives include national reunification, regional influence, control over vital sea routes, deterring external powers, and maintaining domestic stability. Its strategic goals could range from political pressure and economic coercion to, in the most extreme case, a military invasion. But these actions are shaped by many risks and calculations. For learners, this discussion shows the cause and effect logic that lies behind world events. Nations act based on goals, and those goals often create reactions from others. That's what makes geopolitics so fascinating.
Exactly, Julia. Understanding the why behind these decisions helps us think critically, not just about China and Taiwan, but about how all nations pursue their interests. In the next part of our discussion, we'll explore what such a move would involve, the tools, methods, and possible consequences if China ever decides to act. Stay with us, dear listeners, as we continue to uncover the language and logic of global strategy together. When people ask what a military move might look like, it helps to divide the possibilities into two broad categories: military tools and non-military tools. Both types can be used separately or together as part of a larger strategy. From a learner's point of view, we will explain these ideas in clear English and define key words. First, on the military side, you will often hear terms like amphibious, missile strikes, air operations, and surprise assault. These words describe physical actions taken by armed forces, but it is very important to understand them at a high level only. We will not discuss technical procedures or how to carry them out. Instead, we will focus on what these terms mean, why they matter, and what their consequences could be for ordinary people.
Let's begin with the word amphibious. Amphibious refers to operations that move forces from sea to land. In simple terms, it means using ships to carry soldiers, vehicles, and supplies to an island or coastline, then landing them on shore. History shows that amphibious operations are complex and risky for the attacking side because they expose troops while they cross water and make them vulnerable during the landing. For civilians, amphibious action would be dangerous because it could cause fighting near towns and ports, damage infrastructure, and create large numbers of displaced people who must leave their homes. As English learners, note that amphibious combines amphi, meaning both or around, and bias, relating to life or movement. It always links sea and land.
Another military tool people discuss is missile strikes. This term means using long-range weapons to target military bases, ports, airfields, or key infrastructure. When missiles are used in conflict, they can damage roads, power systems, and buildings. That's why experts worry not only about military losses, but also about civilian harm and disruption to everyday life, such as electricity and healthcare. From a vocabulary perspective, strike in this context means an attack, and it's important to remember that the word can also appear in peaceful contexts, for example, strike a deal, so the meaning depends on the situation.
We should also mention air operations and naval operations. Air operations include flights by military aircraft for surveillance, patrol, or combat. Naval operations involve warships, submarines, and support vessels that control the sea and protect or cut off routes. Together, these actions can be used to gain control of the skies and waters near an island. If one side gains dominance in the air and at sea, it can limit the other side's freedom of movement and make a landing or blockade more feasible. For learners, dominance means being stronger, or having more control in a certain area.
Now, we need to explain the term surprise assault. A surprise assault is an attack that happens unexpectedly, with the intention of catching the opponent off guard. The element of surprise can change the balance in a short time, but it is also unpredictable and can quickly escalate into larger conflict. In journalism and analysis, you might read experts discussing the risks of miscalculation. That means making a wrong judgment that leads to a larger unwanted outcome. The language around surprise operations often focuses on uncertainty and danger, which is why diplomats and military planners stress the need for clear communication to avoid accidental escalation.
Turning to non-military tools, one major category is blockade. A blockade means using naval or other means to prevent goods, fuel, or supplies from reaching an island. In history, blockades have been used to pressure a population by cutting off food, fuel, and medical supplies. The humanitarian consequences can be severe: shortages, economic collapse, and a rise in civilian suffering. From a language point of view, blockade and embargo are related terms. Both involve restrictions on trade, but embargo usually refers to legal bans imposed by governments, while blockade has a stronger military connotation.
Another powerful non-military tool is cyber attack. This term covers a range of actions aimed at computer systems and networks. Cyber attacks may target government websites, financial systems, or communication networks to disrupt services or steal information. Because so much of modern life depends on digital systems, successful cyber actions can cause real damage without a single shot being fired. For learners, cyber refers to computers and networks, and attack means to attempt to harm or disrupt. We should be careful. Discussing cyber operations at a high level is fine, but giving practical instructions is not appropriate. Instead, focus on how such actions can affect daily life. For example, by interrupting banking or hospital systems, and on vocabulary like disruption, breach, and resilience.
Infrastructure attacks are another idea you will read about in analysis. These attacks aim at systems that keep society functioning, such as power grids, water supplies, and transportation. Damaging infrastructure can create long-term problems for civilians and hamper emergency responses. Analysts sometimes describe scenarios in which a goal is to force political change by making continued normal life impossible. For English learners, infrastructure means the basic systems and services a society depends on, and target is the object of an action.
There is also the idea of coercion, which means using pressure, military, economic, or diplomatic, to make another side change its behavior without full open warfare. Coercion can include economic sanctions, threats of action, or limited use of force. It is often aimed at convincing leaders or populations that the cost of resistance is too high. When reading news, you might see phrases like coercive diplomacy, that is trying to get a result through pressure rather than negotiations. For learners, notice how verbs like coerce, pressure, and compel describe the action and have similar meanings.
Importantly, scholars also talk about contingency planning. This term refers to planning for different possible futures, preparing responses for a range of events. Contingency is about, if this happens, then we will do that. Governments create contingency plans to limit surprises and protect civilians when crises occur. For English learners, contingency is a useful word that appears in many contexts beyond the military, for example in business or personal emergency planning.
As we describe these tools, we must stress two crucial ideas. First, the use of any of these actions carries heavy human consequences. War and coercion cause suffering, displacement, and economic damage. Second, many analysts believe large-scale invasion is costly and uncertain for the attacker, which is why non-military tools and gray-zone tactics are often considered as alternatives. These are high-level observations intended to help you understand cause and effect in geopolitics, not to provide instructions.
Finally, let's review the key vocabulary from this section. Amphibious, operations connecting sea and land; blockade, preventing goods from entering or leaving; cyber attack, harming computer systems; surprise assault, an unexpected attack; contingency, planning for possible events; coercion, using pressure to change behavior; infrastructure, essential public systems. Practice these words by making your own sentences. For example, a blockade can cause shortages, or governments prepare contingency plans for emergencies. Using new vocabulary and context helps you remember it better.
Understanding what a move could involve helps us see both the technical vocabulary and the human stakes. It also shows why diplomacy, international law, and humanitarian protection matter so much in any crisis. In the next part, we will discuss the broader risks and consequences for Taiwan, the region, and the world. How events of this kind could affect trade, security, and everyday life for millions of people. Stay with us as we keep learning English through careful, real-world examples. Now that we've understood what a possible move might involve, it's time to look at what the risks and consequences could be, not only for Taiwan, but for the whole region and even the world. In international affairs, every military action has a ripple effect, meaning that one event can quickly influence many others. If tensions between China and Taiwan ever turn into open conflict, the results would likely be severe for people, economies, and governments far beyond East Asia. So in this section, we'll explore the potential human cost, regional instability, the effect on global trade, the role of the United States, and the broader danger of escalation.
Let's begin with the human cost, because that is the most serious and heartbreaking aspect of any conflict. Taiwan is home to more than 23 million people, living in densely populated cities such as Taipei, Kaohsiung, and Taichung. In a war, civilians, ordinary men, women, and children often suffer the most. They could face air raids, shortages of food, loss of electricity, and destruction of homes. Even without a full-scale invasion, blockades or missile strikes could harm infrastructure and make hospitals, schools, and water systems stop working. In English, we call this collateral damage, when civilians are unintentionally harmed during military operations. It's a sad but real part of modern conflict.
Yes, and the humanitarian crisis could spread fast. Refugees might try to flee to nearby countries like Japan or the Philippines. That could lead to a regional emergency, with nations needing to provide food, shelter, and safety for millions of displaced people. Humanitarian organizations would likely step in, but access to affected areas might be limited. This shows how one local conflict can become an international challenge. When studying world events in English, it's useful to notice words like refugee, displacement, and humanitarian aid, all of which describe efforts to help people in crisis.
Now let's look at regional stability. East Asia is one of the most economically active regions on Earth, and it depends on peace for trade, tourism, and technology. If a conflict began around Taiwan, other countries in the area could be drawn in, either politically or militarily. Japan might feel threatened because of its proximity, while South Korea and the Philippines might strengthen their defenses. This could trigger a regional arms race, where nations compete to build more advanced weapons. For English learners, the phrase arms race means a competition between countries to produce more powerful military tools. Such a race can raise tensions even further, making peaceful cooperation more difficult.
And that brings us to another major issue: global trade. Taiwan plays a crucial role in the world economy, especially through its production of semiconductors, the tiny computer chips that power phones, cars, and machines. A war or blockade could disrupt this supply, causing massive shortages and price increases worldwide. Imagine if suddenly there were fewer chips available. Entire industries could slow down. This shows how deeply connected our global economy is. So, even people living far from Asia would feel the effects in their everyday lives. perhaps through rising prices, slower production, or job losses. The key word here is interdependence, meaning that countries rely on each other's products and services.
Exactly, Adam. And let's not forget the possible involvement of the United States. The US has long supported Taiwan through defense sales and training, though it doesn't have a formal defense treaty. If China attacked Taiwan, Washington might face pressure from both allies and the American public to intervene. But any US involvement could dramatically increase the scale of the conflict. The presence of US forces in the Pacific, along with Japan, Australia, and possibly others, could transform a regional issue into a global one. This is why diplomacy and deterrence are so important. Deterrence means using strength or the threat of response to stop someone from taking aggressive action.
Yes, deterrence and escalation are two key ideas we must explain clearly. Escalation means when a conflict becomes larger and more intense over time. For example, one side might respond to a small clash with a bigger attack, and then the other side responds with even more force, a dangerous chain reaction. Analysts call this the escalation ladder, where each step makes it harder to return to peace. That's why leaders often say they want to avoid escalation or control escalation. In a Taiwan conflict, if the United States and China began direct confrontation, it could raise the risk of a global military crisis, something the world hasn't seen since the Cold War.
And with two major nuclear powers involved, another terrifying risk would be nuclear escalation. No one expects or wants nuclear weapons to be used, but whenever nations with such weapons enter conflict, the possibility of misunderstanding grows. Even the hint of nuclear readiness could cause global panic. Financial markets might collapse, international air travel could be disrupted, and people everywhere would fear for safety. For English learners, escalation is a noun meaning the increase of seriousness, and nuclear deterrence means discouraging nuclear use by showing that the consequences would be too great.
The economic fallout from such a conflict could also be massive. The stock markets in Asia, Europe, and America would likely fall sharply. Trade routes through the South China Sea might be blocked, affecting the transport of oil and goods. Factories could close due to missing parts, and unemployment could rise worldwide. Even countries not directly involved could face recession, which is a period of economic decline. From a language perspective, fallout doesn't just refer to radiation. It also means the negative after-effects of an event. For example, economic fallout means damage to trade and finance that follows a crisis.
And beyond the numbers and policies, we must think about trust, political trust among nations, and social trust within societies. A war over Taiwan could break down cooperation in areas like climate change, education, and science. When major powers stop talking, smaller problems often go unsolved. People around the world might begin to lose hope in diplomacy or in peaceful international institutions. The long-term damage to global cooperation could last far longer than the conflict itself. This is why education, understanding, and communication are so valuable, and why we study these topics in our English podcast.
So, when analysts say that Chinese action against Taiwan would be an act of war that sparks a global crisis, they are not exaggerating. Such an event could change the world's security system, economy, and even daily life for millions. For learners, this topic is not just about politics. It's about understanding how interconnected our world is. Every decision by a government has consequences that reach across oceans and affect everyone.
To summarize, the risks include the human cost to civilians, regional instability, disruption of global trade, potential US involvement, the danger of escalation, even nuclear, and widespread economic fallout. It's a sobering picture, but understanding it helps us appreciate why peaceful solutions and strong diplomacy are so essential.
Yes, and as we move forward in our discussion, we'll look at what other countries are doing to prevent such a crisis, the strategies, alliances, and conversations shaping the future of peace in the region. Stay tuned, dear listeners, as we continue to explore world events through clear and simple English here on the English Globe. Now that we've explored the risks and possible consequences, let's turn to what's actually happening around Taiwan. Many countries and organizations are already taking steps, military, diplomatic, and technological, to prepare for potential tensions in the Taiwan Strait. In this section, we'll talk about what Taiwan itself is doing to strengthen its defense, what the United States and other allies are contributing, and how all these efforts shape the larger security picture. For English learners, we'll also explain a few key terms like interoperability, arms sales, and strategic partner.
Let's start with Taiwan. The island's leaders know that they cannot match China's military power in numbers, so their strategy focuses on flexibility, speed, and technology. In recent years, Taiwan has been investing heavily in asymmetric warfare. The word asymmetric means unequal or not balanced, and in this context, it means fighting with different kinds of tools and tactics rather than matching China's vast army directly. Taiwan's defense strategy now includes drones, mobile missile launchers, and fast patrol boats, all designed to move quickly, avoid detection, and target larger forces effectively.
Exactly, Julia. One major change is that Taiwan's military has started transforming older units into drone units. Drones, or unmanned aerial vehicles, can carry out surveillance, drop supplies, or even perform attack missions without putting pilots at risk. They allow Taiwan to monitor the seas around the island and react faster to any signs of danger. This modernization also helps reduce costs, since maintaining drone systems can be cheaper than traditional aircraft. In English, we often call this type of shift a defense transformation, meaning a large-scale change in how a country prepares and fights.
Another important part of Taiwan's strategy is called the porcupine defense. Imagine a small animal covered in sharp spines. It's difficult to attack without getting hurt. Taiwan aims to make any invasion attempt so costly and painful that it would discourage aggression. This involves building more coastal defenses, strengthening cyber protection, and training reserve forces for quick mobilization. In language terms, mobilization means preparing troops and citizens to respond quickly in case of war. This shows how Taiwan wants to make deterrence stronger by making defense systems more adaptive and widespread.
Now let's talk about the United States, which plays a major role in this situation. Even though the U.S. doesn't officially recognize Taiwan as an independent country, it remains one of its most important strategic partners. That term, strategic partner, means a nation that works closely with another on long-term goals like security, technology, and trade. The U.S. provides Taiwan with arms sales, which include advanced missiles, radar systems, and aircraft designed to improve Taiwan's defensive capabilities. In English, arms sales refers to the selling or transferring of military equipment between countries. These sales are often controversial, but are seen by many as necessary to maintain the balance of power in the region.
Yes, and it's not only about weapons. The United States also helps Taiwan through training programs, intelligence sharing, and military exercises with other regional allies. A key word here is interoperability. This means that different countries' military forces can work together effectively using shared systems, communication methods, and tactics. For example, if the US Navy and Taiwan's Navy both use similar technology, they can coordinate faster during a crisis. This concept is becoming increasingly important, not just between the US and Taiwan, but among all partners in the Indo-Pacific region.
Speaking of partners, let's look at what regional allies are doing. Countries like Japan, Australia, and the Philippines have all become more active in strengthening their security ties. Japan has recently increased its defense budget to the highest level since World War II, while Australia has joined the AUKUS partnership with the US and the UK to share nuclear submarine technology. The Philippines, on the other hand, has allowed U.S. forces to access more military bases across its territory. These steps all contribute to a wider security network around Taiwan, a web of partnerships designed to deter aggression and ensure stability.
That's right. Analysts often refer to this growing cooperation as the Indo-Pacific security architecture. The word architecture here doesn't mean buildings. It means the design or structure of an organization or system. So when experts talk about security architecture, they mean the framework of military and diplomatic connections that support peace and order in the region. This includes not only the United States and Japan, but also smaller nations like South Korea, Singapore, and even India, which are all increasing dialogue about security coordination.
It's also important to note that not all allies see the issue in exactly the same way. Some prefer quiet diplomacy over direct confrontation. For instance, many Southeast Asian countries, members of ASEAN, emphasize stability and dialogue. They encourage peaceful communication between China and Taiwan rather than choosing sides. However, the presence of U.S. forces and the growing number of joint exercises show that many nations still believe in preparing for potential conflict. The balance between diplomacy and deterrence remains delicate.
And behind the scenes, cyber cooperation is another area growing rapidly. Taiwan and its partners share information to protect against hacking, disinformation, and attacks on critical systems like power grids or communication lines. These are known as cyber defenses. The goal is to build resilience, meaning the ability to recover quickly from disruptions. For learners, this vocabulary is useful for understanding modern conflict, which is not only fought with weapons, but also with data, technology, and information.
Adam. So, when we look at Taiwan, the United States, and their allies, we see a combination of efforts: military upgrades, new partnerships, and improved communication. All these measures are designed to prevent war by making cooperation stronger and deterrence more credible. In simple English, deterrence means making the cost of attack so high that no one dares to start it. That's the core idea behind this entire network of regional defense. Julia.
To summarize, Taiwan is modernizing its forces through drones and mobile units. The US is providing arms sales and strategic support, and allies like Japan, Australia, and the Philippines are strengthening regional cooperation. Together, these actions form a complex but coordinated effort to keep the Taiwan Strait peaceful.
Exactly, Julia. And in our next section, we'll explore how China views these developments, what messages it sends, how it responds to these partnerships, and what that means for global peace and security. Stay with us as we continue to make sense of world affairs in simple, clear English here on the English Globe. As we come to the final part of our discussion today, let's take a moment to summarize the main points. Throughout this podcast, we have explored the complex relationship between China and Taiwan. We discussed military indicators, such as patrols, exercises, and technological developments, and also looked at the motives behind potential action, including national reunification, regional influence, and control over key sea lanes. We examined possible strategies like blockades, missile strikes, cyber operations, and amphibious landings. We also considered the risks and consequences for Taiwan, the region, and the world, including human costs, economic fallout, and escalation. Finally, we explored the role of other actors, such as the United States and regional allies, and how cooperation, arms sales, and strategic partnerships shape the picture.
Yes, Adam. And for English learners, this is a great way to see how complex ideas can be broken down into simpler, understandable language. Notice how we introduced and explained key vocabulary like deterrence, escalation, interoperability, blockade, and contingency. By following current events in English, you can practice not only listening and reading comprehension, but also using advanced terms in your own speech and writing. Remember that words like may, could, if, then, and time expressions such as recently or currently are very common in news discussions, especially when events are uncertain or evolving.
Looking ahead, what should learners and observers watch for in the future? There are a few important indicators. First, major military exercises, especially those conducted by China or Taiwan, can signal shifts in strategy or preparedness. Second, changes in defense spending or new investments in technology, like drones or missile systems, often reveal priorities and intentions. Third, official announcements or statements from China or Taiwan can signal policy changes or new approaches. And finally, pay attention to shifts in U.S. or allied policy, including updated training programs, joint exercises, or diplomatic statements. All of these developments can affect regional stability and global relations.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that this situation remains uncertain. Predicting the future is difficult, and many possible outcomes exist. This is why monitoring the news over time is a valuable learning exercise. As English learners, you can follow evolving language, notice how journalists phrase possibilities, and observe how vocabulary is used in context. Each article or report is a lesson in both language and geopolitics. By reading, listening, summarizing, and discussing these updates, you develop comprehension and analytical skills simultaneously.
So, in closing, dear listeners, remember the educational goal of this podcast. It's not only to understand world events, but also to strengthen your English. By following topics like China and Taiwan, you improve vocabulary, sentence structure, and listening comprehension while gaining insight into global affairs. This combination of language and real-world knowledge makes learning more engaging and meaningful.
We hope today's discussion has helped you see the bigger picture while also giving you practical tools to continue learning English through current events. Stay curious, keep asking questions, and follow the news in ways that challenge and support your learning. Each new story is an opportunity to grow your understanding of the world and your command of English.
Thank you for joining us on the English Globe. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're listening from and what you think about today's topic. We look forward to exploring more global issues with you in simple, clear English.
Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep exploring the world through English. Stay safe, stay informed, and remember, understanding the world starts with asking the right questions.